Hello, I'm Kyle Maxey, editor at engineering.com. Welcome to the webinar, Engineer to Order Best Practices, Improving Engineering Productivity with the Cloud. On the line with me today are presenters Miguel Tam of Propel PLM and Joe Dunn of Onshape. If you have any questions for them, please ask them in the chat and we'll get to them during the Q&A following the presentation. With that, Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you everybody on the webinar. I'm really excited to be talking with everyone here and really excited to be talking with Joe Dunn of Onshape. Today, we want to kind of take a slightly different approach to all the typical things that kind of you hear about with, Industry 4.0 and cloud and digital transformation. I will confess we will talk a little bit at the very beginning, but as former mechanical engineers, both Joe and myself, what we really want to address is, what does all this really mean to me as an engineer? Instead of spending, 50,000-foot level discussions about how the digital transformation changes the executive perspective and company direction, let's drill down specifically on how does it really change how an engineer like me should really think and work, and how do we become more productive in this changing environment. So, though I will confess, let me just start off with a really high level view of how we see things changing from an engineering perspective. So just a quick snapshot, I won't spend too much time here, but key things we're seeing is that a lot of the shift is coming from a very more internal product focused perspective, where all the engineering was done in-house. A lot of the collaboration across engineering teams, whether it's software, mechanical, or electrical, was even done in-house. And probably starting more in the 1980s, we started to see a little bit more external collaboration. And now we're seeing a lot more from a customer impact of how does a customer drive engineering decisions, and how does a customer really drive what an engineer, especially a mechanical engineer, needs to think about when they're developing their products. And specifically, as you know, we're going to be spending all today really focused on engineer to order. So this is specifically for those of you who aren't in the engineer to order business. Well, first, thanks for joining this webinar. But for those of you who are in engineering to order firms, whether you're at a tier 1 or tier 2 automotive supplier, whether you're at a semiconductor company, or maybe a sheet metal fabricator, the key thing for really making a successful engineer to order firm, obviously it's having great products and great engineering talents, but really critical is how do you coordinate requests and input and feedback from the customers that you're building specific products for. How do you work with them? How do you coordinate salespeople that have their own very specific objectives? Obviously, close as much business as possible, as well as the more mechanically and technically focused engineers and your operations people. So just one example, when I worked at an engineer to order firm way back in the day, a lot of the conflict that we always had between engineering and operations, actually customer service is part of this equation as well, is that our salespeople, through obviously no fault of their own, would be closing and signing deals as they should be, but they wouldn't be really coordinating things with us in the engineering team. So we'd get these requests like, hey, we just got a new request from Target to do these custom products for them, or from Walmart to do these custom products. And we'd say, what are you guys thinking? We're already at 200% capacity. We have no more time on the production line in order to fulfill these requests. And it was all through a lack of just coordination. Obviously salespeople are doing what they should do, selling, working directly with customers, but they didn't really have the visibility into what engineers and operations people need to do to actually build the product. So we hear this even today, both companies large and small, where that lack of collaboration ends up with, people working potentially triple overtime, chasing down deals that are not profitable for the company, burning out people, where engineers and operations people are starting to quit because they're just overworked. So a lot of these bad things. But this whole shift from a product perspective to customer's perspective is also bringing on additional impact to the individual engineer and engineering teams. So if you look at these greater external influences, nowadays customers are much more demanding than they've ever been regarding faster response time. So when they put a request for a quote out there, they expect you to reply really quickly, because if you don't, there are much more nimble and digital competitors out there who are responding much more quickly to their requests. Second of all, they expect a much greater input into the design and development and production process. They want to know, okay, what is the latest design? How are we doing in terms of their cost targets? Hey, I have a suggestion for this new product update that we just got from our customers. Hey, can you make that as part of your product process? And I think one of the key things as well that when I was a young engineer, which I was a little naive back in the day, was when you look at yourself as an engineer, obviously you want to create really cool, awesome, innovative stuff, but you also want to make sure that those products are really successful in the marketplace. It's one thing to say that you were, creating this awesome product, at least that you thought was awesome. Maybe it had a lot of patents, but it completely bombed in the market. That obviously can limit your career growth as an engineer or as an engineering manager as well. And then the other thing, obviously, as we all know, products are much more complex. So there's a lot more engineers involved in quotes. It's not just mechanical engineers and tooling engineers, a lot more software people involved. A lot more partners are now involved in design, which this has probably been the case for the last 20 years or so. But now we're seeing a whole bunch of new types of partners involved in design as well. And then the last thing, from a selfish individual engineering perspective, we got to really think of how are all these changes impacting me from a career growth, a career development perspective, and how do I stay on top of all these new technologies that are out there, whether it's IoT or AI? How does that influence me as an engineer as I'm designing these new products? Joe, you want to talk about this slide?
Yeah, sure, Miguel. So thank you, everybody. I've been listening to Miguel, and he's always doing a great job. So what we really want to do is cut over to the engineering side of things and discuss when you're an engineer using having to respond to the design changes that a customer may require, what is important. And today, traditionally, you're going to have so many different stakeholders that probably are going to be involved. If a customer wants a change, they probably have to talk to everybody from the engineering team to know if that change can take place, purchasing, sales for the quote, and I can go on and on. It touches the entire company. The bigger the company it is, the more people and more divisions, more groups that are going to be affected in that decision process. So what we see that is basically the fundamental problem, I would say, with using today's tools. And that's, we're going to show in a few minutes how you take this process where each silo and each stakeholder really has their own tools, copies of the data if you're lucky, different view, and if they can even know where the data, where the particular information from one silo to the other is. So I think we go to the next slide. So what we're going to do is open up a poll, and we want to just get a feel for, those of you that are watching this, and find out a little bit about who you are, what you are. So when it comes to challenges that you face for engineering right now, you can select multiple of these questions. So the questions are, is it quickly responding to customers and sales and executives? Making sure that you have the latest input from your customers, finding and leveraging some of the past designs, that can always be a problem. Sharing the CAD data, the CAD files and designs for people outside of the CAD users, and reviewing and approving the changes of your designs. So I think we can give this poll just a few more seconds to give you some time to vote. And then let's see how those results are. Wow, this is pretty evenly distributed, I would say. Definitely responding to the customers and making sure the customers, you have the latest input from customers, very customer oriented, makes sense. The good news is, on all these topics, I think that's exactly what we're going to show how we are addressing that. Kyle, we could probably go back to the next slide then.
Cool, thanks,
Yeah.
Joe.
Is that you, Miguel? Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think you're right. I mean, I think as an engineer or as an engineering manager, I think the thing you want to think about is just shifting from the traditional product perspective and efficiency perspective, and just thinking about it from the customer's perspective of what are all the things that the customers care about, how do you be transparent and responsive to what they're looking for, and then how do you be much more inclusive to not only customers, but to your partners and your sales teams. Which as an engineer, which as a former engineer, working with sales guys always sounds like a very ironic statement. But basically what we're going to show in a few minutes is really how the cloud transforms engineered order, and then really how it transforms how engineers can be way more productive working with sales and operations. Because I know the traditional way of how engineers work in this process is they're just constantly hounded, or at least I know I was constantly hounded by salespeople, by executives, by customers on, hey, what's the latest status? Hey, can we do this? Hey, what's the latest with this project? And by having everything in the cloud in a very secure and accessible and easy to understand platform, it really opens up how different people can work together, yet still be super productive doing their own work. So salespeople can keep on selling, engineers can still be creating awesome, innovative stuff, and the operations team can be really focused on getting top-notch quality products out the door. And what Joe, we'll be talking about two of these solutions, Onshape and Propel, but what we're seeing in the market out there is by looking at leading cloud solutions, solutions like Salesforce from a sales perspective, Onshape from an engineering perspective, and then Propel from a delivery perspective. How do you use all these solutions in the cloud to really make everyone productive, especially from an engineering perspective, which we'll be talking about today?
Okay, so let's talk about Onshape real quickly. We are an engineering platform. For those of you who haven't seen or heard of Onshape before, we introduced Onshape. It's been over 2 years. I guess we're approaching our third year soon. So it's a very new product, but it is designed to solve really a lot of the topics that we are discussing here. It is a cloud platform, but really the point is that in Onshape, what we found is that we've done a lot of things in our product, but we've really learned since we've been shipping our product what are the problems that are most pronounced with our customers. And it's really a file-based approach when it really comes down to it. When you have a file and you have a system that's running locally and working with files, you're by definition siloed. You're by definition that only one person can work on a file at the same time, let alone whether or not that file can be used in purchasing, and whether or not other people can see the data, and is that file in the right place, or is it stuck on some drive somewhere? And we're seeing, it sounds like a very simple thing, but what we're seeing is that is where there's a huge bottlenecks for engineering firms today, and for them to actually respond to customers. So if you want to respond fast, if you want to be able to give them the designs that they want, you've got to give everybody access to the data, and it's access to the right data, the right place at the right time on the right platform. And those are all taken care of. And Onshape is a CAD system. Onshape has data management built in. So you don't have to have what's traditionally happens. Miguel talked about as he's an engineer. Most engineers have their CAD data. They're doing parts assemblies and drawings, and then if they want to make a modification to something, they usually go to the vault. They check something out of that vault, they get it, they make the changes, and they check it back into the vault. And that is a process that simply is unnecessary. And what we've found in our customers is that you can make two choices, and this I bet will be familiar to any of you that are using computer-aided design or CAD today, is that you can either work fast and respond to customers fast, as an example for the topic today, but then you're not managing your data, because you can be fast, but you're going to skip the PDM vault, you're going to skip the data management because that slows you down. Or you can manage your data and be slow, because that then puts all these bottlenecks in on how you're working. And really what you're getting with having Onshape, having Propel, having this all unified system that can work in solving some of the file-based problems, among others, is that you can now be fast and you can manage your data. And that's really the magic here of this presentation. We can go to the next slide, Miguel.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is, as you mentioned, is being in the cloud is obviously what we think is super helpful for making sure your products are out to the market as quickly and as successfully as possible. So, you know, we think Onshape is awesome from a design and CAD perspective, and how Propel fits in is, hey, how do you take it over to and communicate that product information to the rest of the organization so you can start making it and selling it and then servicing it once it's out in the field. So we have a variety of solutions. What we'll be showing you in a little bit is specifically around product lifecycle management, or PLM. And that's basically taking those designs that Joe was showing in Onshape, being able to, I like to say normalize, which is, I know is the wrong word, but basically normalizing into language that other people in the organization and outside your organization can start understanding and using from a selling and delivery perspective. So things like, what is the bill of materials? What are all those parts and components that we need to start buying, either internally or externally? What are all those tasks that need to be managed so we make sure those products go out the door? And then there's some other things that we'll talk about later, but it's also about how do you have marketing collaborate with that if needed, in terms of what are all those product attributes that you may need to get out to your distributors. And the key thing for us is we are built on the Salesforce platform, which always gets some raised eyebrows when I talk to engineers. But the way to think about it is there's kind of two key benefits of Propel building this product lifecycle management solution on the Salesforce platform. One, there are some really strong technical benefits. So Salesforce, if you haven't heard before, it's a great leading product as a service platform. Gartner rates it as the best business platform out there, you know, beyond Azure or even Amazon. But it gives a company like us really strong capabilities to build things from, you know, data redundancy, security, API and integration frameworks, all this fun stuff that makes it easy to use from a technical perspective. But from an engineering to order perspective and from an engineering perspective, having that customer data along with the product data in one place makes it a really seamless flow and collaboration between sales and customers and engineers, all in one place. And everyone can see only what you want them to see, all in the cloud. You don't need to do fun VPN stuff or give people special tokens. All that's available, just like Onshape, with just a simple login.
Is this me, Miguel?
Yes, yeah, go ahead on this one, Joe.
Sorry. Yeah, and so we certainly can talk about the value of what we're, the value of the cloud. And I actually don't even use the word cloud that often when it really comes down to it, because it's the stuff that you get when you're on the cloud. And we're going to demonstrate the collaboration. One of the interesting things that surprised me when, and I come from a background of working with SolidWorks. I was a 20-year veteran of SolidWorks, which some people may know of, but it's a, very well established desktop mechanical CAD tool out there. But one of the things you would always know about SolidWorks when you used it, and it's really any desktop application, to be honest, is that you save, and you save a lot, and you save often because you're worried about the product crashing. And the thing about moving to the cloud with products like Propel, Onshape, the idea of crashing just goes away. The idea of having to save because you might lose your data is just gone. You don't worry about those things anymore because they're inherently, your data is more secure. It's always available. It's always saved. It's always, you don't have to worry about something that you've done is going to all of a sudden go away when the power goes out or anything like that. And for Onshape, we've had uptime 100% of the time for 5 years now, where our data is, we haven't even had to, bring down the cloud for maintenance, as you see, other products having to do on an occasional basis. So it's just been a very, very reliable, stable platform to build off of. And it's because of the technology that we use. You're going to see, we can access it from any location and any device. I can be on Windows, I can be on my Mac. You're going to see me today on my Macintosh, but I could be on a Chromebook. I can be on mobile platforms, whether it's my iPads or my Android devices or my phone. We even were at a event a few weeks ago at Magic Leap, introduced a new set of augmented reality, mixed reality glasses, which were pretty interesting. But more importantly is that Onshape is inside, we run on the Magic Leap device, the full product. It's not just some viewing tool, but being a cloud platform allows you to really give full access anywhere, any device. And the other thing is there are no different versions, there are no different installs of the product. It's simply everyone is accessing the same thing. So the IT part of it, we've provisioned companies with thousands of seats, thousands of users, and we've done it almost instantly. And that same company would spend days, if not weeks, just upgrading their machines to the latest service pack for their CAD tool. And those things are completely gone when you, with the modern platform. This is exactly the way software should behave. People shouldn't be IT experts and having to spend their time managing all this software, maintenance types of roles. And I can't leave out security. Obviously, security is extremely important, and the reality is the data is more secure than the typical desktop installation and network. And I always tell people that, if you're getting email and or your computer's on the internet, by definition, you're already vulnerable to security issues. And then you combine the fact that if you're running on your own local system with your own protocols and your own IT services and all this, chances are they could be very good, but chances are they could be inconsistent, and or each division can have different policies. And what the cloud really gives you is a unified single point where it's best-in-class security processes and best-in-class security in general. And the data is actually more secure than anything you can do on your own. And that's one of the beauties of being in the cloud. So we have another poll that we're going to open up and that we've just opened up. And we want to talk about the cloud a little bit internally, because this is always interesting of what the feelings are within a company, and each different division in your company, they have different feelings about it. So are you using the cloud today in your company? Is it used across the country, or across the company, but just a little bit less in engineering? A little bit, you have limited adoption, or you don't have any at all. So it's kind of a spectrum here of where you are in the high usage to low usage to no usage category. And we'll leave this open just for a few minutes, or a few more seconds, I should say, while I kind of talk through it all. So it looks like limited adoption of cloud is where the highest percentage is. It's interesting. The one that got 0 is very interesting. So, you know, it's not surprising that most of the audience here is in the middle of moving towards the cloud. You know, I would categorize it in that way. We definitely have talked to many customers who 4 years ago or 3 years ago said we don't trust the cloud, right? The we don't trust the cloud category. What is, you know, and I could say, you know, we have all these reasons why, you know, maybe, you know, there's reasons not to have that attitude. But what I find very interesting is we don't really have to do much because most other industries have already transitioned to the cloud. Whether, you know, the engineering world is one of the few that hasn't yet. To be honest, it's one of the few left. And it's slower moving for a variety of reasons. And this is mission critical data, mission critical information and software. But it is more secure. And most of these companies that we've talked to in the past, were only 2 years ago or 3 years ago said, oh, we'll never go to the cloud, they call us back up because we don't try to convince anyone that you should. But they wind up telling us, oh, we now are moving to the cloud. And it really is, there's so many reasons for it. It's not that we want people to be in the cloud, it's that you're going to get benefits from being on the cloud. I think we can go to the next slide. So if I'm not mistaken, I think, oh, we've got a few customer testimonials that we have in here. So we wanted to just kind of give some reasons why some of our, you know, in this case, Think Labs was a customer that is exactly fits in the category of being a skeptic. I mean, they basically said, we don't believe it. We don't believe your software can run in the cloud, let alone would we put our, you know, data on the cloud. But I mean, when they use it and they try it, they realize, you know, light bulbs go off, and it's an epiphany for most of our customers where when they make that jump and actually do a pilot project, it doesn't take more than just to really put it through its paces in a very realistic way. We've yet to have someone who says this isn't a much, much better way to go. And we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, Joe, and I'll just add in one other comment. Yeah, no, just like, yeah, obviously the comment about, hey, we don't trust the cloud. You're right. I mean, I think like even 5 years ago, yeah, I got a lot of feedback from engineering and executives like, hey, don't even talk to us. The cloud is so far away from us. But this is just an example. AMS Technologies is an engineered order company. And the key thing for them is using the cloud as a competitive advantage. So their competitive advantage is basically, one, being able to provide a much more transparent working relationship with customers, so they can actually see all the latest data or specific exactly what data that they want them to see. And then it has really improved engineering productivity. So it's definitely worked for them both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I think if the engineering.com team can transfer controls over to Joe, enough talking, and let's actually see some stuff. So Joe will kick it off with an Onshape demonstration, and then you'll see specifically how that, from an engineering order perspective, can transfer over to Propel in communicating the rest of the product data to the rest of the organization.
So just a little sanity check. Are you seeing my screen right now? Miguel? Anybody?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
I see a lot of windows open.
Well, I'm on. Oh, you do. All right. So we have a different screen. Let's see if I can switch that. You should be seeing the. I see what you're seeing now. So you're seeing the Onshape. I'm on the Onshape webpage. So are we good to go?
I see the Onshape website. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So I just wanted to start here. Not that everyone can go to the Onshape website. They don't need me to do this. It gives you a good overview of what we do and what we are. But like I said, it's an engineering CAD platform. What I typically like to start out with is just going to a web browser, because the entire point of our product is that I can go up to any computer anywhere in the world, and I simply go up to the URL and I go to cad.onshape.com, or if you're one of our enterprise customers, you'll have your own domain that would fit there. But you simply put in your username and password, and I will not talk while I do this because I can never type. I already messed up once. So you just have to remember that. But the cool part about this is that, assuming I did everything right, which I did, I literally just did the equivalent of installing, licensing, service packs, everything. Something that in my past life would have taken hours, and I would have had to been very, very careful about what software, patches, what drivers were on the computer, what hardware. It would only work on Windows anyway. And I'm on a Mac here. So, I mean, this is crazy how easy that was, because that is everything in all of it. This is where all my stuff is, right? So we never worry about, drive:/server where my data is. The data is always, when you log in, your data is here, okay? And if I'm in Propel, Propel is going to find my data from the Onshape information, and we're going to show that in a second. The entire world, all of your users, everyone is looking at a single source of truth. I can go and navigate in some of these different folders to see what kind of data is there. I can look at all the properties about a particular design. In this case, I think I like using this one. There's a great example of a throttle. It happens to be very typical of the type of thing that you would do with Onshape. This is part of an engine where you put the throttle on top of, that brings in the air and brings it into the combustion engine. And this is exactly how and why you would use Onshape. These are very standard mechanical design components. You'll notice a couple things that for an engineering to order, I mean, we do parts, assemblies, and drawings, and I can get into high level detail of all the CAD part of Onshape. But I think it's really about how you're going to talk to the customer, collaborate with the rest of the company, and use this tool appropriately. You notice that I can see there's a person in this document, and it's Miguel. And Miguel and I can already start communicating to each other, because this is much more of a, first of all, Miguel didn't have to do anything either. He just logged in, and I happened to have done something with Miguel where I shared the document with Michelle. So the way that you collaborate with users, anyone in the world, whether they've seen Onshape or not, is you simply give them access by putting in an email address. So in this case, I'll invite Philip. I can allow Philip to be a view only. I can allow him to edit. I can even transfer ownership. We can do it through companies, through teams. There's a lot more ways to control this, but you have complete control over. I don't want Philip to be able to control to export or to copy. He can comment, and I will give him the permission to export to only. And I've just added Philip into this document. He can now do those things that I've allowed. What I didn't have to do is I didn't have to worry about, oh, does Philip have Onshape? He now does. He has a link that he clicks on, and he's in this document. He may even pop in there in a minute if he's paying attention to his email right now. And Philip's in Florida, so we'll see. But anyway, we can have 100 users all in the same document. We have a master model. There are no files. Everybody in the company, everyone that should have access to this data is looking at one thing, one master representation. And we don't have to worry about each user had their own copy or did a checkout in the vault and might have been out of date with their product. As the user, I can do all kinds of things. And by the way, the other part of this is the whole way you control this and work with people and do what we call versioning and release management, which is a big part of how I mentioned before, where companies can either be fast and respond to things, but then they get really sloppy with where the files are, and the engineers basically do something and then move on, but they skip the design process or the data management process. Or you can manage your data, and then you've got a very convoluted process that takes a long time and can be very slow. And what we've done is we've combined both, because in Onshape, we have the ability to not only work with your CAD data and do all your high-end feature-based parametric modeling capability in workflows, but data management is seamless. It's built into our system, and you just use it. But I don't have to go through a checkout or check-in process. If I want to make some changes, I can go into any of these particular models, and if a customer, for instance, asked us to, the trumpets were too long, they need to be a little bit shorter, I can make a change to that. Maybe that's not right, and I can make a change. And by the way, the beauty of this is that any of the users can do this, right? They can go in and let's make this, actually want to put it back to the long one and make it that one. And we'll leave it there for now. And then I can make another change over here. I have complete flexibility to navigate, to access the particular pieces of geometry, make those engineering changes. If I'm collaborating with a customer, or if other people in the company were also accessing this data, they see this change too. They don't have to wait for some process to see those changes reflected. Miguel's seeing those. If we switch to Miguel's screen, we would see that he sees this change as well. So it's a full collaborative environment that has no barriers for people to work together. Now, the one last thing I want to show.
No,
oh yeah, please go on.
Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to chime in. Yeah, and I think that it's really awesome, especially if you're in an engineering to order perspective. And I'm not an Onshape sales guy, but I've talked to many engineer to order companies when I've mentioned like, hey, they have questions about the cloud. I talk to them about Onshape, and it's like, wow, you mean my sales guy doesn't have to be a heavy CAD user? They can actually have a discussion with customers live, showing them information, bringing in the engineer if needed, and actually making those changes on the fly. And that's typically, from an engineering productivity perspective, that's awesome.
You know, any salesperson in the world, any person in the world, you share them in, even if they, and what you'll see is, notice here that we're really, I made this user up, but this could be a client who's never seen Onshape before. We actually invite them in. So they would literally click on the email and it puts them right into the system with the permissions that I gave them. Later on, and Miguel was absolutely right about everything he said. The other thing that's awesome is that I didn't have to email. Even let's just say that today, what typically will happen is the engineering team will get feedback from the salesperson kind of in batch mode after they met with the client. They will go make the changes, and then probably screenshots at best will be sent around. Maybe a CAD model will get sent, and it's sent through email, right? And the data is sent attached and sent through some other communication process. You don't do that here. You give direct access to everybody. They don't have to learn anything to use this. And then you know where your data is. You notice that I gave these two users permission to use the data. I can also take that away at any time, and I can remove Philip from the share. Philip can no longer access this data. There was no copies that Philip made because I didn't allow him to do that. So it really is just, it's orders of magnitude more productive when you really get down to it, because you're cutting out the bottlenecks that are involved with your traditional file-based systems. And then the one last thing I want to just kind of touch on is that I've made a couple changes to this design, and the other part that really is the handoff and the thing that makes the most sense when we start, before we go into the PLM side of the equation here, where you want a lot more people to have access to this data in a different way. Onshape is a complete data management engineering change order system, and it's in the CAD system instead of bolted on top. So in this case, I've made a change to the throttle. The throttle boss, we changed the size of the trumpet because these were the two things the customer wanted to do, and if I wanted to go through a formal release process based on chain, well, actually, let's just call it ECO-9999999. So whatever the name is, you can add approvers, you can add observers, and you can give it this is based on the change, so-and-so asked for, and you can document as much or as little as you want. And you can tell I can't spell or type, but you submit it, and that goes through an engineering change order that pumps the data to all the appropriate areas. And what you'll notice in our version graph is that it's completely incorporated into the version graph, where it shows that there's a change that's pending. There's actually two changes that are pending because I haven't approved the process yet, but all of it is integrated into our system. And I'm barely scratching the surface of how slick this is, because it's one of those things where in the past with SolidWorks, for sure, I dreaded supporting, helping customers that had data management, which was everybody, or trying to use it ourselves. I mean, the dirty secret at SolidWorks is nobody internally uses data management because it's so hard, yet they try to get customers to use it. Here, it just works. And so I think, Miguel, at this point, it's probably good to transition over to you to show how you can consume this data and pass it on, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so if engineering.com folks, if you can let me share the screen, that would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think what Joe has shown here with Onshape is basically what is the cloud. I mean, there's some really amazing stuff technically that Joe hasn't even scratched the surface on that Onshape provides. But from an engineering to order perspective is how do you get everybody to collaborate much more easily on these customer requests. So bringing in customers, bringing engineers across the world, bringing in suppliers. You don't have to worry. It's like, oh crap, they don't have the latest service pack installed, or hey, they don't have the latest version. And especially from a customer and sales perspective, they don't have to be a CAD genius in order to collaborate. They can actually see everything. And how Propel fits into this basically is once you're done from a design perspective and have that information where you're ready to share that product with the rest of the world, that's where Propel comes in. How do you get your operations people to actually start buying and making and ordering parts? How do you get your marketing and sales teams on board if you're maybe selling it through other distribution channels as well? So basically what I've done is I've logged in to our application. You don't need a separate login. You don't need a VPN. And all this information here in the dashboard is all the product data that you need to understand what's going on with all your projects and all your products. So I'm just going to drill down into specifically the project, because that's probably one of the more common questions we get is, hey, engineer, what's going on with the project? So in one place, you don't have to get bugged by your sales team or your executives about what the latest status is for the product. I could just drill in right into this throttle assembly, very creatively named, of course, and see specifically, hey, here is where we are in terms of the phase gate of the project. So here we've had this CAD discussion with the customer already. I should probably move it to specification because we're getting pretty close. But here you can start capturing every single possible thing you can think about for the project. Unfortunately, this one is a little off track. I will drill into that product specifically. And then obviously you can see a Kanban board. I love the Kanban board. It's easy to see who owns what. You can drag and drop things really easily, transfer tasks to different people. And I've worked with multiple project management systems, and I find this whole task board perspective much easier to have a coordination and actually get individuals and users to update status. So let me just drill into the specific product that this project is managing, which is the throttle body assembly that Joe mentioned. So you can see here a variety of information once you're ready to share it with the rest of the organization or with external people. So things like the item number, the revision that we're at. Here's a thumbnail that you saw from Joe. And I think one of the great things from a cloud perspective is you can start collaborating. So, from an Onshape perspective, people have already started, designing the item, but you can say, hey, you know what? I remember that we've had similar issues in the past with a supplier, and you can start collaborating all in one place, specifically questions that you have. So it's not something that's lost in emails or phone calls or in Slack conversations. It's all within the context of the product. So from an engineering and order perspective, you can also get customers and salespeople engaged in the process of making sure, hey, is this right? Or is there anything that we're forgetting about? Hey, what if we went with this design instead of this part? Is that okay with you? And you can have that all captured so that if you're doing a custom design, you're not looking back and saying, oh crap, who said that was okay to switch the throttle quadrant from this supplier to that other supplier? That's all in one place. And that bill of materials that Joe showed, actually let me close this window, we manage in Propel that a multiple level hierarchical assembly, and all this information can be shared from a standard bill of materials view. You can see what we call a manufacturer's view if you're buying specific, let's say, brackets or screws from different suppliers. And the key thing from a Propel perspective is once you start communicating this information, whether it's mechanical parts or SOPs or work instructions or media files, all this stuff that you have here, you can also start managing the changes as well. Oh, and actually, before I do that, one thing I forgot to mention is from a Propel and Onshape perspective, we don't have to worry about, okay, how do we store and synchronize all these files between Onshape and Propel? That's all, it's a basic link. So it's all being managed from an Onshape perspective. So you just click this and it'll probably force me to sign in again. Oh, no, it doesn't. But it'll take me right back to that workspace that Joe was talking about earlier. So there's no need, I should let it refresh. There's no need to figure out, okay, I updated this in Onshape. How is that updated now in Propel from a file perspective? It's all in one place. So the last thing I want to show, and then we'll turn it over to questions, because I know Joe and I always talk way too long. But from an engineer to order perspective, you can start having changes and change management as part of the process. So maybe you remember from that discussion, hey, we had some issues with that throttle quadrant. Creatively, I'm going to suggest we replace it with the super throttle quadrant. And why that's important is now that you can say, okay, great, I'm not just an engineer making that change on my own. Now let's go ahead and we can route that around and make sure we have documented reviews and approvals to make sure that we're good to go with this change. And that's important not only from an engineering perspective, because trust me, I've made plenty of engineering changes where I've regretted not informing other engineers, but it's also important to have it documented from a customer, a finance, and an operations perspective, so that, you know, is that part that you're suggesting, my super throttle quadrant, does it meet the certain quality standards that we're looking for? Or from a finance perspective, hey, do we want to go with a higher cost part, and how does that affect our margins when we're bidding out this part for this customer? So what I'm showing here is basically a very simple change management workflow. Here it's 5 steps. You can make it 8 steps. You can make it 2 steps. But it's all super completely configurable, very easy to understand. You can see specifically the exact item that we're changing, as well as you can assign different approvers based on who you want to go through. And the way we control it is you can have specific people through different phases of the workflow, filling out specific fields of information. Maybe there's a marketing review, maybe there's a finance review, all up to you. And the key thing is, the last thing is you just go ahead and approve. You can approve, because it's in the cloud, you can approve it here on my desktop. I can get a notification on my phone and actually approve through my phone really easily. It's all really meant to make your life as an engineering team as easy as possible, especially in this whole engineering to order workflow. So with that, let's go back to the slides, and maybe Joe, if you can start this one, and then we'll wrap it up with one more slide from me.
Well, I think everyone can read this slide, so I'm not going to read through each one of these. These are all basically good questions to ask yourself and to kind of identify, you know, we call it design gridlock at Onshape. And, you know, if you're suffering from design gridlock, which everybody is, you know, I mean, at some point, you know, you're not being able to do maybe as many iterations as you really wanted to do. Perhaps it's just a matter of not having the data in as accessible format in the way you want it when you need it. There's Miguel said something really early in the slides that I thought was really compelling, is the career aspect of it. You know, this is state of the art. This is what people should know. If you're using, you know, one of the interesting things that I find with engineers is we all want to be, you know, using the best tool out there and using the latest technology. And I will tell you that this is it. And this is where, if you're a graduating student in the engineering world today, we don't even have to spend 5 seconds explaining this to them. They expect software to be exactly like what Miguel and I talked about They don't even understand when they're told they have to install a product or get a license key for it. You know, they're in the Google Docs world of how, you know, they're, I hate to say Facebook, but I mean the idea of installing software and having it run only in a certain location and having files that you work with, are each one of those is actually becoming an kind of an old way of looking at things in a lot of ways. They're not all bad, but that's where I would say is one of the more compelling areas as well.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And just to wrap up, so I think those are a lot of good things to ask yourself. If you aren't facing any of those issues, I'd say, hey, good for you. Maybe you don't need a cloud, but if you have any of those issues where there's a lot of more collaboration and people bugging you for design updates, I highly recommend, one, just get a trial of Onshape or Propel. Just go to our website. We'll follow up with all of you after this webinar, but yeah, try it out. It's if you know SolidWorks, Onshape will be a breeze, and Propel is a breeze as well. We get a lot of people saying, yeah, there's almost no training required for Propel. And both of us have a number of online demos, so go to our websites and take a look. We'll also send you a white paper and a case study so you can find out more about how we both help in the engineer to order process. And with that,
I'll add one more thing too, just as an action item, and I know we're going to ask the questions, is that what we've really found is that, I wouldn't suggest anyone look at just taking whatever product they use today and getting rid of it and switching to Onshape anyway. I'd love for you to do that, but where we found and this is the same with SolidWorks when we were rolling out SolidWorks, is that having a new project and using the product on real projects is the key. And so finding that opportunity where you have a new part that you're bringing out, or a new project that allows you to try some new technology, is really the way to do this. And most companies have that opportunity at some point in time, and it lets you kind of, once you validate that the products actually do save you they're going to save you time, they're going to make you more efficient. You're going to become it's going to be very clear once you do it. I've yet to find a company that doesn't really scratch their head and wonder why they didn't do this sooner. So sorry, I'm done.
Joe, you're never done. But let's maybe turn it over to some questions. So Kyle, if there's any questions from the folks.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions today. The first one comes from Nick. He wants to know if multi-purpose editing in Onshape is simultaneous, or if there's a checkout system associated with it.
Yeah, Nick. So our product is inherently collaborative or simultaneous from the ground up. So we don't need to check. The easiest and the best frame of reference is Google Docs, because they were kind of the first product that I've ever used, that did this, where two people can be in a Google Doc in a slide or a document, and one person can create a paragraph, the other can fix the spelling as they're typing. You don't have to worry about one person locking it. We don't do check-in and check-out. We don't need it. Because of that simultaneous editing capability, we do versioning. When you version something, a version is immutable. A version is a way to create a snapshot of everything that you've done in that point in time. But we don't slow you down with that serial check-in, check-out. Only one person can modify it. And oh, by the way, only one person can see it, because when they check it out, it's copied to their local instance of their whatever they're using, and then no one else sees it till it's checked back in. So this is a radical, much improved way of tackling that problem.
Okay, excellent. The next question we have comes from Raj, and he says you guys started your demo by going into folders and looking for your throttle assembly, but he's wondering, can you start with the PLM system, do a search there for the assembly, and then open the assembly in CAD or in Onshape directly from the PLM system?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, we have a very intuitive search. You just basically type in, actually, it would probably take too much time, but yeah, you can just go straight into our.
You showed doing it.
Yeah,
so,
you can just go. You can just go. I'm afraid I'm going to lose some screens here, but you can just go straight into our application. We have a search bar right on the top. Type in throttle or body or assembly. Even if you're slightly off in your spelling, we'll find that item for you and just click on it and open the file just like I showed earlier in the demonstration.
It's a matter of the URL, just which URL is it? So that's what Propel can find for you. Yeah.
All right, excellent. And you guys mentioned earlier in the presentation that engineers have been like kind of slow to adopt the cloud. So I think it's important to iterate what kind of security measures that you guys have that protects IP and also protects your system from being hacked.
Miguel, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I'd like to say the way you think about a cloud, I found it interesting that 42% of the people say, hey, we don't trust the cloud. I think there's a logical argument that I could show, hey, here's all the different ways we have security built into our platform. You know, you could have it from a double factor authentication. You could actually restrict it to specific IP addresses that can only access your thing. You can have very granular roles and privileges swept down to the field level or object level. There's multiple data security measures. We're built on the Salesforce platform, so they have multiple data security measures, which, God, we can probably spend a whole hour talking about. But I think the interesting thing, Kyle, is no matter how much I explain the logical reasons why the cloud is super secure, there's always, I think, I call it a more emotional reason of getting people to overcome their belief that the cloud is not secure. And I think the simple explanation is like, for example, I was talking to a bicycle company a few months ago, and their comment was, yeah, you know what, I don't trust the cloud. I explained to them how cloud is secure, yada, yada, never been hacked, et cetera, et cetera. But I found it interesting. They said, yeah, we make all our bicycles in China. And I was like, okay, you're sending all your files, right, all your bills and materials to a quote unquote trusted supplier in China, yet you're not trusting the cloud. Trust me, I wasn't able to convince them, but there's it's a very strange world. And I used to be an engineer. I know exactly I would have that exact same mentality as well when I was an engineer. But there are logical reasons why if you put all your data in the cloud, trust me, it'll be way more secure than sending your files overseas to suppliers through emails or VPNs or whatever you want to do it. I'll leave it at that. Maybe Joe, if you have anything.
We also have a bunch of papers online. I mean, it's a hard question to answer. Technically, we can answer it. I mean, the fact is, the more you know, the more you realize that it is actually better. It is more secure. The hacks you hear about, you don't hear about the cloud getting hacked. You know, it's not the cloud that's the danger, but there are, you know, people share their password, they share their password, or you know, so there's a lot of reasons to do it. But what I would say is just from a technology perspective, the way we tackle this is we're more than happy to meet with anybody if they want to learn more. We have some security experts in our company that have not only done webinars, and not only do we have white papers to talk about the technology, but we're willing to meet with someone to explain exactly all the different levels of security that are, you know, in our system.
All right. Well, we're running up on the 3 o'clock hour right now, but I do want to get a couple more questions in. And I think a really important one is if a user already has a PLM system, does Propel work in conjunction with that existing PLM system?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Kyle. So the simple answer is like, yes, we can work in conjunction with an existing PLM system. We always like to say that we prefer you completely throw out all your PLM systems and use Propel. I think there's probably two scenarios where people have asked us to coexist with their PLM systems. One is if you are a several multi-billion-dollar company and invested years and years into your PLM system, you know, there could be a lot of spaghetti to untangle before just you can swap everything out. So we have had multiple companies come to us saying, hey, it's great. We have actually 5 PLM systems. You name it, we have it. Our engineers are doing a great job collaborating, but we need to get that product data out to everybody else in the organization. So marketing, suppliers. I just, for example, had dinner with someone from a very large consumer goods company where they say, hey, the good news is we have 5,000 suppliers accessing our product data in our multiple PLM systems. So that's great. A problem is we have 100,000 suppliers. And that's the value that Propel can provide to the rest of the organization. It's really easy to log in for the cloud, super secure, easy to learn. And then the other scenario is if you're we see it more in the automotive or heavy industrial space, where if you are working with several OEM and they have their own CAD system and PLM systems that they want you to use, we have had some companies come to us saying, hey, you know what, we have to keep these other systems in place, but hey, can you provide an overall level of collaboration and visibility on top of all these other PLM systems?
Okay, great. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the day. So thank you, Miguel, and thank you, Joe, and thanks to the audience for joining us. If you guys came in late to the webinar, don't worry. We're going to have a recording of it up shortly on engineering.com. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.